Most business owners have no idea how much money they actually need to make. And I was one of them until I sat down and ran the numbers. What I discovered changed everything. I assumed that as long as I kept growing my business, the money would follow. But despite hitting my goals, my bank account told a different story. My personal bank account, that is. And that's when I realized growth doesn't guarantee profit. In fact, I didn't even know exactly what the word profit meant. And without the right framework, I was just running on a hamster wheel. Now, you may be feeling the same way. And what I really needed was a simple and effective way that I could turn all that hard work I was doing into profit, into financial stability, something that was actually sustainable. And what I'm going to present to you today is my money map. I used to think that because people went to college for finance, that it's this really complicated thing. But the reality is it can be really, really simple. And if you assume that it's something that's really complicated, then you may never spend the time to actually look at it. And in the next 20, 30 minutes, I'm going to be able to give you something that's really going to help you. Now, 90% of businesses, they fail within the first few years. And even out of the ones that don't fail, they don't quite make the amount of money the business owner wanted to or thought that they would be making. So when I first started my business, I wasn't somebody who was trying to build a $100 million company. I wasn't one of these people that was trying to make a ton of money. I just wanted to make six figures. I figured if I could make six figures by the time I was 30, that I will have been successful. And back in the day, my first business was a CrossFit gym. And I had in my head that if I would just hit this membership goal that I had set out to hit, that I would make it. And that number was, I figured if I had 125 members paying $125 a month, that would be about $15,000 a month. And that would be plenty of money for me at the time. But the truth is that even though I was making $15,000 a month, it got eaten up really quick. And what I was really taking home was about $4,000 a month. So the business was making $15K and I was making $4K a month. And it got eaten up with expenses, rent, payroll, and a bunch of other stuff. Now, you may not have all those same expenses that I had, but this is still going to apply to you. And every year I would sit down with my accountants, I would go into the meeting, and I would feel defeated because I didn't even have enough money to pay my taxes. Basically, my business would run, I would pay everything out of the business, I would take what I would need for my living expenses, and then at the end of the year, there was taxes. So I ended up on a never-ending tax payment plan. You may know what I'm talking about. So if you've left a job where you're no longer a W-2 employee, and now it's time to pay taxes, it can be really, really difficult because every dime you make a lot of times has to go back into the business or into just covering your living expenses. And so at the time, I had a bachelor's degree, I had military experience, I wasn't taking any vacations, and I did feel defeated. I got angry at myself. I just wanted to punch myself in the face some days. It was not a glorious path. I did not feel like a success. But even though I didn't feel like a success, a lot of people in my town at the time, they treated me like I was a success because I was a quote unquote business owner. And they just figured I was making plenty of money because they knew how much I was charging. And the thing about your customers is they're always focused on what it is that they're paying. They never sit down and run the numbers and go, well, they always think you're making more money than you actually are. And so that actually made it even worse because people treated me like I should have plenty of money, and I didn't. So I had like this facade, and I avoided talking about money to people because I never really wanted them to know exactly how difficult it was for me at the time. And so my solution at the time was to just work harder. But then one day I realized that no amount of hard work was going to fix my broken business model or my broken pricing model. And I was doing the same thing that my dad did. My dad was a business owner. And I saw him try to outwork bad numbers as well. And when I had that realization, that's when things started to change. And so I can remember the day clearly. It was a Tuesday. And I had gotten my business to the point where I had some staff, and so I wasn't running every single moment of the day. But I was also not making the amount of money I wanted. And so I sat down with my business partner in my office and a whiteboard, and instead of looking at our current numbers out of frustration, I just said, let's start with a clean slate. And I was so disgusted at this point. I was starting to have resentment towards my members, resentment towards the staff, none of it which they deserved, and none of it which I voiced, but people could definitely feel it. And so I was ready to shut the business down. I told myself, if I can't make the amount of money that I expected to make here, why am I even doing this? Now, what was I going to do other than that? I didn't know. Maybe get a job or something. But I sat down and I thought, well, what's the number? Now that I'm making $40,000 a year, what's the number that will actually make it feel like I'm being successful? And so I came up with the number $75,000 a year. Now, $75,000, and this was 2010. In Memphis, Tennessee. And so $75,000 would have been a lot of money then, laughable now. But I remember sitting down with my business partner and saying, hey, I want to make $75,000 a year. What do you want? State your number. And he said, $75,000. Of course. I was hoping he'd say less, but he didn't. He was being a copycat, of course. And that total was $150,000. And that, which meant we needed to profit in the business by $150,000. As a business owner, that's the money that you make. The money set aside at the end of the day, the leftover money is the profit, and that's what the business owner takes. But I didn't even really know what that word meant at the time, and we were just, without knowing that definition, we were running the numbers anyway. We just got down to first principles in a way. But when we came up with that $150,000 number, we realized we didn't need to make a small shift. It needed to be a dramatic shift. And not only that, I had another business partner that was not a part of that meeting. The gym was not his full-time job like it was with me and my other business partner, but he wanted it to be. And so we just made the assumption he'll probably want to make $75,000 too. And so we said $225,000 profit. Now, if you're remembering the numbers I mentioned at the beginning of this, we were making about $15,000 a month, which is $187,000 a year. So we saw that we needed to make more profit than we were generating in total revenue at the gym at the time. So things really needed to change. And so it was time to reverse engineer our numbers. And this is something that most people don't get into until they've been in business already, but it's something that you can do if you are just starting. I recommend to do this now so you don't actually have to go through that pain cycle that I experienced and so many business owners I've consulted also experience. And so we figured that our gym had the capacity to have 200 members. We knew our gym space, we knew how many classes we could run. So we thought 200 members, and this would allow us to pay our staff, give people health insurance. We wanted to be good employers. And so after we're doing the math on the profit, looking at what it costs to run the business, we figured we needed to make about $450,000 a year to do that. So we took the $450,000 and we divided it by 200 members. And then we divided that number by 12 months because we charged a monthly rate. And we figured that on average, our members needed to be paying us $187 a month. And that's a number I'll never forget. That number is ingrained in my brain. Even though I've started several businesses since then, that 187 stands out because it was that much of a pivotal moment. So our current average of what our gym members were paying was about $125 a month. I actually think it was closer to 110. And when I ran this number and I realized we need to be making that much on average per member, I felt a mixture of hope and panic all at the same time. And I was hopeful because I now had clarity on what needed to happen. But I also had a little bit of panic because I was afraid that somebody might be at the gym signing up at a contract that's way too low right now. So the very next morning, we had new contracts drafted up, and we went to the gym and we changed our pricing model. And I decided to grandfather everybody in that had already been with us already because a lot of people, when they change prices on their current membership. We decided to grandfather people in and then have the new people pull the average up. And also we knew that there's some churn. And so we went from $125 a month for a 12-month commitment to $265 a month if they did a 3-month commitment and they had to pay that in full, $212 a month for a 12-month commitment, and $197 for an 18-month commitment. Something really interesting with the numbers there is there's something, even though there's a $15 difference between a 12-month and an 18-month agreement, it really caused people to go into the $197 a month, 18-month commitment. And that's an important thing to note because this is pricing psychology. Even though the actual number is not that much different, the perception of the price is a big deal, whether it's over $200 or under $200. So something to remember as you're moving forward is it's not a logical thing. There's a feeling that happens for people at different stages or different price amounts and different benchmarks, under $100, over $100, under $1,000, over $1,000. And so because I had gone through this process, I had gotten to this point where I really stopped giving a fuck about the opinion of people when I named the price. Up until that point, anytime I had told someone a price, I had this sinking feeling like, oh, I hope they don't think it's too expensive. Like, I feel like maybe I'm taking advantage of people. But when I ran those numbers and I reverse engineered, I was like, nobody's taking advantage of anybody. If anything, I'm taking advantage of myself. And so something really shocking happened. We raised the prices and we actually got more members to sign up that next month. It blew my mind. My expectations were shattered in a really good way. And then it happened the next month and the next month. We were actually we had more people signing up at a higher rate, and we started experiencing success again. And after reflecting on it, it had really little to do with our prices on what was causing people to sign up or not. It had a lot more to do with the man handing them the agreement. I had embodied my values. If you follow me for very long or been a part of any of my memberships or coaching, you'll know that I'm not a big fan of the language of like charge what you're worth, because putting the value on a human life is a really strange thing to do. And I state like I embodied my values and then they felt it. I embodied my values. I valued my time at this amount of money. It has nothing to do with what I'm actually worth. It's what I value my time at. And they could feel that. And that difference, that energy shift that I had, is what allowed people to continue to sign up with me. It had nothing to do with the price. And that's something to remember for yourself as well. And so the reason I chose the $125 a month in the first place is really, really important. I had this really bad habit of going to other CrossFit gyms' websites and checking out their prices and finding out what they were charging. And come to find out, they were charging between $100 and $150 a month. And I knew, because I was in Memphis, Tennessee, that was known for having really low incomes and some of the lowest cost of living, that $150 a month would be too much. That was my mindset at the time. And so when I had my financial revelation, when I did this reverse engineer, I realized that these other gyms were also suffering. So no matter how cool their website looked or how fancy their gym was, the gym owners weren't taking home a lot of money. And after I got to know a lot of them, come to find out they had full-time jobs and then they were running the gym on top of that. And they all had aspirations of the gym being their full-time job, and they were never able to reach it because their pricing was all wrong. And so this is a big lesson in not comparing yourselves to others. You'll hear a lot of people giving business advice where they'll tell you to go look at your competitors and this and that. I don't like looking at competitors at all. dialing into your own authentic value and your own authentic value that you bring to customers and your own product. If you start looking and comparing too much to others, you'll end up copying too much. And so I really urge you to become unique in what you offer and in what you charge. And charge what's actually going to work for you, and really ignore what's going on out in the market. And so years later, I was consulting other gyms because I'd gone through this process, and I was working full time, and I was making good money. I was able to buy a house. And when I started consulting other gyms, I realized they were stuck in the same comparison loop. Well, the other gym in town, or this or that, same exact thing. And so this is a vicious cycle of fear that basically makes the gym unsustainable, which makes the gym owners, or any business owner, it can cause someone to start experiencing resentment towards their membership or their clients. And I see this over and over again. And that actually ended up ruining the culture of a lot of gyms and a lot of businesses in general, because this isn't just about gyms, this is for business in general. This applies to every business. And what I saw over and over again is that their members would actually go start their own gym because they were so unhappy with the culture, and they were unhappy with the culture because the gym owners weren't actually, they were starting to build resentment. And so you may be thinking, well, I don't know if I can predict what it costs to run my business. And we're gonna reveal that to you. There is a way to start predicting, no matter what kind of business you're running, what kind of expenses you're gonna run into, and so you can reverse engineer as well. So your business model may be different, and how you execute your business is really personal, but we're gonna help you see and predict things so that you can reignite your passion, because that's something that's happened for me over the years. Is every time I've had a business breakthrough and a realization, my passion would return. And that's a problem for a lot of business owners, is they start losing the passion they had originally for the business because they had an idea of what it would become, and then it doesn't meet their expectations, and then they end up losing that passion for it. But we can get that back. It's one decision away. So the first thing we're going to do is you're going to identify where your personal profit target is. And that's how much money goes into your personal bank account at the end of the day. So if you don't have a personal bank account and a business bank account set up as separate things, I encourage you to do that now. And so I want you to think about, how much money do I want to make in 3 years? 3 years from now, how much money do I want to make? And then I want you to add 20% to that, because things are going to change. And there's always, people tend to have, they do this thing where I call it the bare minimum mentality. They start setting their expectations based on like, what's the least amount of money. They add up their rent, they add up, how much they've spent on groceries and all that, but they don't really factor in everything they're going to run into. So I have a rule of adding 20% to a lot of things. And this is one of them. So if your personal profit target, let's just say it's $10,000 a month, we'll add 20%, make it $12,000. So one of the things we also get to talk about is the psychological profit programming that exists in our culture. And this is one of the things that really hinders people from even being able to sit down and do the math. There's an aversion to getting present with the numbers. And one of the reasons is because how our culture looks at profit as a whole, and even how people in business traditionally look at profit is backwards. And so we're going to flip that. So traditionally in business, the profit is really considered to be the money that's left over after operational costs, your expenses, taxes, whatever it is. And the key word here is left over. Profit is considered something to be an afterthought. And the world at large looks at it like this. Accountants look at it like this. Finance people look at it like this. And people, and it's really backwards. I want you to be thinking about profit first. And there's a book called Profit First that I do recommend that you read. But another thing to note is that even people who aren't in business have an opinion about the word profit. And there's something in our culture that makes profit to be a bad thing. And a lot of those narratives have been used by politicians to create us versus them narratives, and it's really like a predatory way of getting people to, because most people aren't business owners, is to make people believe like someone's being taken advantage of. And that is something that's a really heavy negative thing in our culture, and I think that we're transcending that a bit right now. But it's something to keep in mind of like, have you bought in to, do you have a negative connotation with the word profit? And so if you do, then there may be some type of thing to unravel there. There may be some type of unconscious belief patterns that are running it, or maybe you're conscious to it and it's too scary to look at, or the feeling that's associated with that is blocking you. And so I did a video on this and a blog post about this several weeks ago, and you can find it by searching the ultimate mindset hack, or you can go into my videos or go to the blog and type that in. And if you watch that, it really gets into how our emotional world is driving our behavior and how we can actually shift that. And so that's an important thing to do. If you don't shift that, this is gonna be an uphill battle. If you get to where, if you go, oh, I do have a negative association with making money and having profit and all that. Well, now that we have an awareness around it, we can start making a change. And just making that change will make a huge difference, because this is simple math. This isn't calculus. Finances are not complex. It's plus and minus. It's subtraction, addition, division, multiplication. That's all it is. You know, anyone in the 4th grade can do this. Another thing I want to warn you against is listening to accountants. So accountants were trained to count money, and they're really like, listening to an accountant to give advice about how to manage money is like listening to a scale to give you weight loss advice. They may tell you like what you did to get where you're at, or they might be able to tell you like the result of where you are right now, but it doesn't really paint the whole story, and it doesn't give you a plan moving forward. And so this happens a lot in a lot of industries, is where someone becomes an expert in one thing, and then they have this assumption that they're an expert at a much larger piece of the pie, but it's not really the case. You as the business owner get to become the expert on on strategic financial planning. And so also consider that if you're listening to accountants a lot, the people who are attracted to that industry, you know, they seek safety. They're not really innovative. It's a highly technical job. And there's nothing wrong with them, but they're just not the type of person that you want to be listening to. And I remember sitting in the office of my accountants early on in my career and really listening to them. And over time, after I learned how to manage money a lot better, I realized that they should be contributing like 1% of what they're talking about is what I'm considering in making my decisions. And so the same thing goes for accounting software. Accounting software is great for like taxes. Like the whole industry of accounting is set up for the purpose of taxes, not for growing your business. So just keep that in mind as well. If you're going to your accountants and you're thinking they're going to give you business advice, it's just not really true. And so we get to move forward with our own definition of profit. And so our definition of profit is the money you choose to take home as the business owner from creating value for your customers. So this is the money you choose to take home as a byproduct of creating value. So the key here is it's a choice. Your profit is a choice. It's not something extra. It's not something left over. It's not something that just happens because you're doing business. And so because it's a choice, you get to take 100% ownership of where you're at financially right now and moving forward. And it's the only way to really make a difference in your financial future is by having 100% responsibility, 100% ownership of it, and maintaining that ownership over time. So I'm now gonna walk you through the numbers. Super simple. Step one, I want you to get real about what your desired lifestyle costs and write that number down. Easy. Step two, add 20% to that number to account for all those unexpected things that are come up. Or you may notice that you want to increase your lifestyle a little bit. Step three is predict the cost of doing business. And we do this by this is really simple, and you can do this and you can adjust it later as you get further down the road, but it's basically multiplying your personal profit target by 2. So that's going to cover your expenses, your taxes, etc. And so that's your business target revenue. So the example I'll give here is if your personal profit target is $120,000 a year, then you're going to create your revenue target is going to be $240,000 a year. That's the total amount of money that your business is bringing in. And then step 4 is going to be to check your prices and model, see if it's possible to hit that number. And that's it. Now you may find that the pricing and the way you're doing business does not allow you to hit that number. You may go, wow, I thought I was going to be able to charge $2,000 a month of 10 people and I'm going to be able to hit my numbers, and it just doesn't work. And so in that case, it might work, 2,000 times 10, so on and so forth, but you might get close. But most people are charging too little, and they're not able to serve enough people, or they're not able to attract enough people into their business to do it. And so this is where we get to sit down and go, okay, well, what kind of business model, what kind of pricing are we actually going to do? And so by doing this, you may feel discouraged. You're like, oh, I don't know if I could actually do business. You may feel like, oh my God, I have so much clarity. I now know what to do. Either way, you get to make it work. And this is just the starting point. Every entrepreneur at some point in their journey hits that point of doubt where they're like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do next. And that's okay. Because this is where creativity comes in. This is one of my favorite things about business is there's a few set principles, but there are no rules. No one can tell you how much to charge. No one can tell you how you're going to serve your customers or clients. That's something that you get to set and you get to be creative about. And creativity really happens within constraints. And when you set the constraint of, I'm going to make this amount of money in this amount of time, per month or per year, then you start getting really creative about how you're going to get there. So if you're wondering, oh man, I just ran these numbers, I don't know exactly how I'm going to do it. Look, I got you covered. And that's where 1 Hour Business comes in. You can join our community membership. You can hop in there, and I have calls every Thursday, and we answer your questions. We have loads of educational stuff in there. Where you can find new ways to present your business offers, different business models, things that I've found that worked over the years. And we have a lot of other people in that community that are running successful businesses. And you can basically just ask them how they're doing it. And what you'll do is you'll come up with your own unique way of doing things. No two businesses are alike unless you're running like a McDonald's franchise or something like that, which we're not doing. That's not what we do here. We don't just copy and paste, all right? So I want you to learn how to be a business owner. And the more people who learn how to run their business and be creative and have unique offers out in the world, the better world we're all gonna live in together. So I encourage you, run that simple money map, do those numbers, and then if you're interested in going in deeper with us, just click the link in the description, come join us in the community, and jump in the conversation.